Hello and Happy New Year to you all. Please do like and subscribe. And actually this year I really need to improve the number of people that are subscribed on my channel. Given the number of videos that I do on here and the things that I give away, I really want to improve the number of people subscribed. So please do share the videos with others that you think might be interested. I would really welcome more subscriptions considering all of the work on the channel, and your help in that would really be appreciated. So thank you very much for that. What I want to do today, and it will be interesting actually to see how this sort of thing pans out. What I find more and more is that people often comment or ask me to cover certain things, and all of those requests, interests are welcome. I'm not necessarily going to do everything that is asked for, but where I can help, I certainly will. And one thing that does come up is studio space or workspace and how to make the most of it. And usually what it's framed in is this kind of question around, yes, that's all very well, but I don't have much space. How do I make it work for me? Now, let me just give you a bit of perspective in case you're new here and you don't realise, what I'm set up here. I'm in my studio space now here. This is my home studio, and it's a room that's about 4 meters square. And I'm very lucky because it's quite a light room. It's southwest facing. I'm in the north of England. But it hasn't always been here. And over the last 8 years or so, 7 years, I have had a number of spaces which I have worked in, which have been studios. And they've been studios, apart from this one, I've had 3 other studios. All of them have been in an old mill, and they've varied hugely in size. And the first one was a tiny little kind of corridor-like space that was 5+ meters by about 2+ meters. It was a bit like being in a narrow boat. Then I had a huge studio, but it's a very cold building. And so what I found in the huge studio was a lot of it was quite dark. And in the lightest bit, I kind of cocooned myself in that and built some walls around it and heated that bit and worked in that bit. So although I had a big studio, actually my working space wasn't huge. And then finally in the mill, I had a squarer space that was a lot bigger than what I'm working from now. And the reason I'm sharing all of that is because my realization is that whatever space you have, what you need to do is to make the most of it. And so what I'd like to do today is to share with you some tips for working in whatever space that you have. Because I think oftentimes when we're in big spaces, it's not like all of a sudden everything is so much better. Oftentimes we don't use them very effectively. I think the main thing about working in a studio space, workspace, whatever you like to call it, is working with what you've got and making the most of that. And I think that's really the key of it all. And what I've got in front of me, I've written down, so I don't forget, I've written down some of my tips. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each of them. And as appropriate, I'm going to share with you some things from around my studio here with me today. And the moving and the sort of shuffling that you hear is my Greyhound Lexi. She's not squeaking, but she's moving around a lot and readjusting herself. It's a bit like us in studios, readjusting herself to make the most of her space. Anyway, so I digress. So let's get on with the list. And the first thing, as I think I've alluded to, is right in many ways, I think this is all about mindset. Because often when I get the questions, it's, I only have such and such a space, what do I do? And it's almost like from the beginning, we're seeing it as a kind of a constraint, a restriction. And as we know from our artwork, oftentimes restrictions and constraints can work in our favour. They can focus us in. We can get just as much, if not more, by being focused. So I think the first thing I would say is that work with what you've got. And by that I mean there's no point in me sitting here in a 4 meter square studio and saying I want to do 10 meter wide canvases. I want to do everything at massive industrial scale. That isn't going to work in here. I could work quite large in here though. So I don't need to constrain myself apart from those, you know, relatively unrealistic ambitions if one had those. So what I do is, or what I constantly do is, I write lists and I write, you know, I journal. But I think what's useful if you are at the stage where you're just thinking about your space is write a list of what is it that you really want to do in that space? What media do you want to use? You know, have you got all of these materials that you need to store? What is it that you want to do? And that will kind of help you sort of think about it. But in that first recommendation, I would say, think about it in a positive way. How can I work with what I want to do? What is it that you want to do? That's the first thing. And oftentimes it might be multiple things. So in my case, I'm a mixed media artist. I'm working with collage, I'm working with watercolour, I'm working with inks, I'm working with acrylic. So all of that is a lot of materials. So the first thing is, you know, how do I want to, you know, what is it that I want to do? And how big do I want to work? And what surfaces do I want to work on? So it's a case of just sort of gathering your thoughts, if you like. I think that's the first recommendation, rather than, you know, sort of getting caught up with what you can't do, because it could well be that what you can't do, you don't want to do anyway, in which case it's all good. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, where is it that you want to do your artwork? So as I go through this list, I'll bring it back each time to my situation as a way of explaining to you what I mean. So in my case, what did I want to do in terms of surfaces? Well, for me, when I was going to have one space in my studio, I needed a flat surface where I could do work, because always on paper and smaller works, I work at a desk or table situation. And so that's something I wanted. I also wanted another space, which is the space behind me, where I could do non-painting work. I work a lot on my laptop, developing and evolving my website, as I'm starting to do now, doing that sort of thing, developing my courses. I need a desk which is more of an admin type of desk. It's not a messy desk where all of the different materials are going to be used, because I don't want to kind of combine the two. I'm going to end up with a mess everywhere. So I knew I wanted two desks, and that's what I've got. I've got this one, and I've got the one over there that I'll share with you in a minute. I also wanted, because I had got used to in the studio working at a wall, so when I'm working on canvases and on panels, I like to hang them on the wall. And so I have quite a small painting wall, which is a piece of ply that's got screws on it at 8-inch centres, and I hang whatever I'm working on, and I'm usually working in groups, on that painting wall. And you'll see that, I'll put the link in the notes, but you'll see that on the previous video that I did a few months ago, where I shared a walk around this studio space. So that's, you know, sort of think about where is it that you want to work, and how do you get those surfaces sorted out. So that's the second thing. The third thing, and importantly, is what materials do you have? What are you going to need? You might already have them. I already had all my materials. But what I needed to do is to think about, well, I've got, you know, all of these different mixed media. I've got all of these paints. I've got all of these brushes and things I use to apply the paint. I've got all these collage papers. How on the earth do I fit these all in the space? Mainly for the materials I'm using trolleys. So these two trolleys you see in front of you, the one on the left has all sorts of mixed media, from pastels to pencils to crayons to watercolour to charcoal and all sorts of things. And the one on the right has implements and tools and things I use excuse me, for stenciling. And then if I move around over here, I have a large trolley which has on the left hand side excuse me, has all of my paints. And actually this one also has paints, but it's my tube paints in this old second-hand trolley that I have. The other space saving I have is this. I keep all my brushes next to my painting wall. I showed this in a previous video. I'll put the link to the early video where I did the studio tour of my home studio. I'll put the link to that video in the notes. And you can see that this is actually it's an IKEA contraption for kitchens, and it's just little buckets hung on a rail. And just to show you up here, I have something for my papers. I actually use it's a plate stand, which usually would be in the kitchen with plates on it, and I've used it to stack some of the different papers that I have. So that's another thing I use. And you might watch this video and you think, oh, this doesn't apply to me because I've already got my studio space set up. I would beg to differ on that one. I think it's an evolving thing. It's not something that is done and then that's it. There are ongoing things that you need to think about and do, and that's what I'm sharing with you from now on. Really, is all of those things. So what I do is I have a Pinterest board. So if you're used to Pinterest, it's literally a mood board, but digitally. Just if you don't know what Pinterest is, just search it on Google. And I have an ongoing mood board where I collect different images that I find of different clever storage ideas or clever ways of presenting things within the studio. You know, the next thing I want to share is, as I'm looking around my space and as I've been developing little video snippets that I'm sharing with you today, it occurred to me that a lot of the things in the studio that I find really useful, I have got from secondhand stores or IKEA. They've not necessarily cost a lot. The most useful things haven't usually cost a lot. They're just, you know, the right thing. So for example, I've got an old trolley which has got little drawers which I use for my tube paints. I've got the most wonderful wide table that is great because it enables me to to have quite a lot of things on that table. It's not just narrow, it's a deep table. I've got other tables that have all been got from secondhand stores. So do think about using that sort of resource for your studio elements ideas, especially because none of us have got endless amounts of money with things as they are at the moment. It's just great to be able to reuse things, repurpose them, find these different things. That's all good. The next thing that I think is absolutely critical, and it's completely obvious, but often we can get ourselves into a fix. And this time of year, as we're starting again, is a brilliant time. Tidy up and have those tidy up sessions as almost ways of organizing your thoughts and, you know, having a bit of a clear up. It's a sort of a start again, get the decks cleared sort of approach. And I think being able to do that on a regular basis and just get things tidied up, put away, not only does it create a space, a clear, you know, sort of space so that you can, you know, get your work out again, start again, feel a little bit fresher in your mind because you've had that clear up. And I've talked about clearing up and tidying up before over the years. But I think it also enables you to take a little bit of stock. And it enables you to think about where you're at, and it enables you to see things again and see things afresh. One of the things I think that you know is an ongoing thing is check in with your space and what's happening in your space regularly. And by that I mean, you know, just see what's going on with certain things. What things are working great for you? Great, keep them obviously. But what things aren't working? And where things aren't working, how could you sort those out? Could you improve on them? How could you make them better? So I just wanted to share this space. This has never really worked for me because until now, this has all been stacked high up to here, all the way across with boxes. And now I've managed to just make one single pile, and I'll probably get rid of this one here. And it feels that just by clearing away some block boxes, I can already now get over here to this wall, which I couldn't do before because it was stacked high. And it's always been the bit that hasn't worked for me. And then finally, and obviously, get rid of the stuff that is not working for you. So those 8 points, those top tips, I just hope that they'll be useful. And as I said at the beginning of the video, please do share the video for others to subscribe to. And I hope you found this useful, and I'll catch you next time. Thanks a lot. Bye.